Good morning on this chilly October 8th, 2023. My name is David Knox, and I have multiple system atrophy. P. Um, I have good news for not only you, but also for myself. I was recently called and accepted into a clinical trial, and I wanted to talk to you about it because, in my own opinion, this trial is going to be absolutely revolutionary. Again, that's in my own opinion. Um, It is called the AAV2 GDNF. So AAV2 GDNF. And what that means, AAV2 means adeno-associated virus serotype 2, and the GDNF is glial cell line derived neurotrophic factor. It's a mouthful, but it's worth it. There have been a lot of research, not only just for MSA, but 20 times out, 100 times out for Parkinson's. As they say, and I'll just repeat what they say, but as goes Parkinson's, and so does MSA, because we're really going after the same areas of the brain, not specifically the same things because they are different. But 90% of the disease is pretty much the same in the brain. What's going on is the same. So these proteins that we have that keep misfolding are the problems. They don't even really know the research what's actually causing it. We think it's misfolding protein, and we think it's a culmination. It's a clumping up of all these iron proteins that are in the brain that are causing the symptoms of MSA and Parkinson's. They just don't know, believe it or not. So you read a lot of articles and get many different stories about what's causing it, what could have caused it, outside of the environmental factors and things like that. So, for somebody like me who has msa-p, my main issue is the Parkinsonism is right here in the middle of my brain, not the outside, but the middle. The putamen and the caudate, together in the nucleus caudate. If you have msa-p, Parkinsonisms, then that is your issue. It may be just a putamen like me. It may be the caudate. It may be a combination of the putamen and the caudate, right? If you're msa-c, then you're down here in the cerebellar in the very back of your head, the lump that sticks out, and that's where the origin of your symptoms and issues begin, right? Completely different from msa-p to msa-c. So, when you're looking for treatments and things, therapeutics or whatever, to try to attack these symptoms into therapeutics and or cures, somebody like me would be looking for something to deal with the putamen. Again, it could be a caudate too, but putamen for me, because that's what is absent. I have no radio tracer activity in my putamen. Does that mean it's not working? Well, not necessarily, but there's no reaction in the putamen that's creating dopamine. Since there's no dopamine being created by the putamen, you get these symptoms that I have, all the Parkinsonisms, slurring of speech, and tremors and things like that. that obviously that cascades into the autonomic features, right? But there is a breakthrough. If you looked up AAV2 GDNF, the original clinical trials of these things have been going on since the 2010, 2011. They have been trying to find a way to reboot the system like a computer. If your hard drive crashes, what do? You swap out the hard drive. If your RAM crashes, what do? You swap it out, right? We can't swap out the putamen. Any brain surgery is significant and major. There is no minor brain surgery. Anyone who says minor is really just downplaying it too much. So if you can't replace parts of the brain, what do? Well, they have been trying for the better part of over a decade to inject, to get these modified genes back into the putamen, to take out, which will override the system. It will rewrite the putamen and the caudate to give it so the proteins to reboot the putamen to start making dopamine. And it seems pretty simple because that's in fact what stem cells. That's what I did over a month on August 12th. That's what I did for stem cells. So take stem cells. Some stem cells, like the ones I took, can take the place of any cell in your body. But they have to get there, right? My stem cells were intranasal through the arm too, but also intranasal through the nose to the blood-brain barrier up here. It's still not at the putamen, but it's as close as they could get safely. for doing those type of stem cells. So these AAV proteins that they're talking about are the size of a DNA. I would tell you they're 4.8 kilobases big, but it's the size of a DNA, and my fingers can't get that close. So, you have to take my word for it. Very small. And the prominent feature of GDNF, right, of the glial cell derived neurotrophic factor, as labeled, is to support the survival of dopaminergic and motor neurons. So it prevents the apoptosis in motor neurons during development, decreases the overall loss of neurons during development, rescues cells from ectotomy-induced death, and prevents chronic degeneration. So the GDNF part of this research is the survival of what me and other people have lost, those neurons. It protects the proteins to keep, living. So, how do you get this there? Well, I want to quote this very, very slowly for you. This is another. So the original clinical trials went many different ways. Okay, they were very. They tried many methods to get from point A to point B. And I just want you to understand that. I'm just opening this thing so I can read a little bit better. The significance of this new, not the older one, but this newer clinical trial of AAV2 GDNF is by using CED, convection enhanced delivery, that's a whole other article too, of the AAV2 GDNF treatment was shown to produce clinically relevant and long-lasting regeneration of dopaminergic system, the dopaminergic system. Relevant, long-lasting, and that's not even the good news I have for you. These tests have been done not only in NHPs, non-human primates, rats, whatever, but they were also done in clinical trials with humans. So what they tried on previous clinical trials was direct neurotrophic delivery in Parkinson's patients having intracerebellar, right? Cerebroventricular and intraputamental infusion of GDNF. They are hitting everything around, into the putamen, around the putamen, below the putamen, the ventricular cavities that go into the cerebellar. They have tried everything to get this in the last decade. It was this AAV, but now it's AAV2. It's the second generation of these modified genes. And they've realized that the putamen can only absorb so much at one time. I mean, they can only inject you with an IV so much force before bad things happen, pain or whatever, And just like stem cells, if you don't inject it or get it to the putamen in the right area at the right time, at the right quantity, diffusion rate, a lot of this medication, this treatment goes where it's not supposed to go, like stem cells. This isn't white blood cells where they know what to do and they attack and they do their job really well. These are modified treatments, genes that they're trying to get it into the putamen to replace the dead ones and start taking over. Well, the putamen is very simple. The door to the house is this big, and if you're too big or too little, you're not getting in. And you have to step through the door, the threshold, at such a speed. Too fast, it doesn't work. Too slow, it doesn't work. But then you got to get to the door in the first place. You got to find the door to the house. So there's been a lot of methods trying to get this AAV2 to the right part. So there have been in clinical previous trials, and even with the NHPs, non-human primates, events and lack of therapeutic efficacy associated with those, with the protein delivery, right? And the reason for all these adverse effects was poor target delivery. It's not going where it's supposed to. So fast forward to a couple years ago, again, in NHPs, everything starts with animals first. Everything in the medical world. Better for a rat to die than a human, right? That's duh. So now what they're doing with this new clinical trial, the AAV2 GDNF, which is, I think, Quest Diagnostics. I'll put the link in the description. I'll try to remember too. But just for the record, Quest Diagnostics in Michigan. What they're doing is they're using all FDA approved equipment, but the mechanism, how they're getting it from point A to point B is completely experimental. Basically, in a nutshell, they're taking a slinky rubber tube. This is a bad explanation, and they are snaking it through your brain, like trying a roto-rooter of sorts for your drains at home. The brain is not a solid piece of mass. It's a big bunch of spaghetti that's pushed together. They can get it there. They've done it. But using these pieces of equipment for this treatment is experimental, even though the equipment is FDA approved. So what they do is they drill, stay with me, they drill 2 holes, depending on issues and complications, but they drill 2 holes, left, right, top, or bottom, and they snake it at your putamen, and they control the absorption rate of this AAV2 GDNF, of the fluid to your putamen. They control it because the putamen can only take so much liquid so fast. And the good news is, when they did this just recently to the NHPs, the non-human primates, says the results were, and I quote, significant and persistent clinical recovery. Significant and persistent clinical recovery. They are rebooting the system in primates. There's no reason for it not to work in humans. This method. Well, Dave, of course, how can you say it has to work in humans? Because rats can get MSA too in Parkinson's, and they do. How does a rat get MSA? Well, they take MSA from someone who has MSA, the proteins from the brain, and they touch it, they inject it into the brain, that brain part of the rat, and they get, that's the only way you can, by contact. If you had brain-to-brain contact, you would get MSA. Like catching the flu, touching a doorknob, or something like that, right? So they use interventional magnetic resonance imaging. They use a new type of MRI that employs skull-mounted aiming devices, integrated software system, and customized step-design cannula for real-time targeting and visualization of CED in the brain. They use a special MRI, a typical MRI contrast agent, gadolinium, I think, for tracing and visualization of the delivery of AAV2 vectors, right? Again, it's all FDA approved, but it is experimental because the equipment they're using is, in fact, not made for what they're trying to do. I don't know how to tell you this, but if they can plant this AAV2 into my putamen, your putamen, they have just rebooted your system. Is it a cure? I've been the last person to say that. But how long did it take you to get bad? I'm still kicking along here at 2.5 years, 2 3/4 years with my MSA. And even if they reboot the system and it has the same progress as right now, 2.5 more years. But that's not the point. Did MSA start? What's causing it? Don't know. But if we can flush out the old and bring in the new, who says MSA is even going to come back? Therefore, I signed up for the AAV2 GDNF and was accepted last week. And I've been asked by a few people, family too, why in God's name would you go get brain surgery with this clinical trial? Because it targets the putamen specifically, and that's what my issue is. I'm going to go out swinging. I'm going to say, hey, I tried what I could. We tried stem cells, not all of them, but we tried stem cells. Right? There's a lot of other ATH 434s and things that are trying to slow it down or whatever. But this clinical trial, albeit serious with drilling into the brain, being admitted for 3 to 5 days, follow up for 12 visits in 1 to 3 years, may seem excessive, but what does a person have to lose who's losing it already? I mean, all the clinical trials they've done before with the drilling and doing what they did before, there were absolutely no bad side effects like from the procedure, except for minor internal brain bleeding, and that's not what you think it is. Every surgery has some type of internal bleeding that like this one rectifies the cells very quickly thereafter. Right, blood cells will take over and they'll clot it for you. No swelling, no brain hemorrhaging, no nothing. So it may sound really horrible to go through with a clinical trial like this, but in my own opinion, I think we're at the precipice of a solution. Maybe not the cure, but the solution. And that's the hard part is we may not be able to stop it. You won't be able to stop COVID going forward. That virus is out there. It's going to keep mutating. It's like the influenza. It's going to be out there forever. But if we have a solution, a remedy for it, when we find it, it's no longer a deadly thing at this point. We don't have to worry about how many years do we have left. We just have to worry about maybe how many surgeries we have to go through. You know, how long does it last? Maybe questions like that. But there's no reason to not think it's not going to work. If they rebooted the primates putamen by injecting this, not injection, by infusing it the way they do, why wouldn't that work for us? Those genes in our putamen are not specific to each person. I hope you know that. Those proteins are the same in mine as they are in yours. Yes, we might have different blood types, different DNA, you know, muscle type and muscle percentage and fat percentage and height and color. But those proteins in your putamen are the same for everybody. Why would it not work? I'm crazily optimistic about this. Simply because they're directly going into the putamen, well, right at the putamen, and significant and persistent clinical recovery. Remember, rats only live so long, guys. So, we can't follow can't follow a rat for 10 years. They don't live 10 years. I think they live 2 or 3 years. I think cats, I think, are like 7 years. Animals like that. So they could live more. But dogs are 7 years. I think cats are more than that. But so we can't sit here and say, oh, a rat lived for 10 years. They don't live for 10 years. But to have research telling you significant and persistent clinical recovery on top of the results are able to produce clinically relevant and long-lasting regeneration of the dopamine system, you should be happy. This no, I will tell you, I will actually step that back and say this will do nothing for solar dollar msa-c, but they could probably use the methodologies they're doing on msa-p this with msa-c for something else. The mechanisms of msa-p versus msa-c are not the same on how they start and what they produce. It's a crazy start though. They're both misfolding proteins. If we can do it for P, we can do it for C. I just want you to have faith, believe, and have hope that there is possibly a corner. Now, mine is supposed to start within the next couple of weeks. I have a personal time plan for early November, so I don't know if they're going to start it before or after, just because maybe there could be complications. It's how it is for anything, clinical trials or medical. They don't really want to start you on things if you're going to be gone for a while or missing in action or whatever. So mine was supposed to start in a few weeks in mid-October. My process already, inclusion and exclusion criteria are done. So my next steps are to go to Farmington Hills, Michigan is where it's the headquarters for this one. There's many of these tests, by the way. Don't think, anyway, let me finish this. I got to go to Michigan to get they're going to diagnose me with msa-c, do all the tests, or msa-p, all the tests for on their side, paying for everything, transportation, food, and hotels, whatever. They're going to verify it themselves, and then they will start the treatment shortly thereafter at the Ohio State University, I'm told, which is really, really nice university. Sorry, Michigan fans, or and Buckeyes. It's a great institution, really great, medical too. And I want to conclude by saying, please don't think like I did when I started my search for clinical trials, that there's only one here or one there. I didn't want to. I started applying for a couple at the Mayo Clinic who previously had say, hey, it was early onset Parkinson's, and I didn't apply there because I thought Mayo Clinic was hosting those. It was theirs. And now while Mayo Clinic and OSU and other universities might have their own clinical trials, they mainly don't because they got to fork over a lot of money for that stuff. That's normally the medical companies that are doing this, like this one, Quest. I called Mayo and they said, no, it's not Mayo doing it themselves. They're handling the medical part of it, but it's the facilities, right? But it's the companies that are using Mayo Clinic. And she says, well, you don't have to go to Mayo for this. There's 22 locations for this test, for this research that's going on. And then I realized how big of a fool I was for thinking that, for not knowing, for assuming that it was actually the medical hospitals themselves that were doing the clinical trials. And it's not. It's the medical companies that are doing this. They're just using the medical equipment at Mayo and ISU and Indiana Health, locations like that. So please don't think like I did that you can't get into a clinical trial because it's at a certain place and you don't like that certain place for whatever reason. And also the inclusion and exclusion criteria is different for everybody. I just told my dear friend that yesterday. And, this person thought that it was very strict and this person would have been ruled out, but in fact, they were not. So, we only have, so what's going to hurt by applying? It's like applying for a credit card. Probably a bad thing to say, but what can hurt? I mean, for us, in msa, nothing. Well, you're going to be told no. Okay, whatever. Been told no quite a few times in my life. So that's my good news for today for both you and for I of this clinical trial. I'm going to post a link on this. I appreciate you guys. I love you to death. This is absolutely great news. I'm going to keep posting on my journey with this clinical trial too. Again, I got to be completely seen through it with the medical part in Michigan in a few weeks. And after that, once I got that, I'll post again saying, hey, we're in or we're out. You never know. I'm not going to say it's 100% I'm in, but they want me there because I do qualify. So I love you guys to death. I got a whole bunch more videos I have. I just got to finish editing editing them. Sorry, my speech is not too bad today, but it's happening. And please check out our podcast, Daisy and myself. Mostly Daisy wanted to create a podcast, and I'm going to start posting it on YouTube as well. We have it on Podbean. We're going to on Spotify and things like that. So we host patients of MSA, those that have MSA, caregivers of MSA, and even friends and family of those who have had someone who has MSA as well. Their stories, and you'd be very, very, if you think all stories are the same and everything goes the same, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So check it out. Obviously, there's no cost for these podcasts, but advocacy is everything. Love you to death, and I'll definitely see all of you in the next video. Thank you very much.